Okay, in this video what we're going to look at is checking out the alignment of our image and see if we need to do any transformations or distortions on that. We're also going to do a quick color and level correction on our image, do a crop, and also set out the perspectives for our image. So quite a few things, but this is just setting up our initial starting plate. So let's jump straight into it. One of the things I'm going to look at first of all is see if I can do a quick color and levels and also hue and saturation correction. Now this is just to get our starting plate looking good. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to image, adjust, and have a look at the levels. So that is a really nice way of jumping in and just being able to push up and down the brightness and contrast and dark levels of our image. So really get it to pop. Now this, you can look at this in a mathematical sense by looking at the histogram here, but mostly I just suggest grabbing these little markers here and pushing them around until you get something that's going to work for you, that's going to have enough detail for you to play with. I will say though that if I do apply this and hit OK, it is permanent, and if you are completely happy with your outcome, then that could be really useful. However, there are some other techniques if you want to be able to maybe go back and repair this. Now in most cases I'm usually set with this, but if you are dealing with a client that needs changes or you're just not sure yourself, you may want to consider using these different techniques, and here they are. The first technique is to use adjustment layers. So over in our layers panel, on the bottom middle of our layers panel, this little half circle sort of situation here, you can click on there and you can go to levels. And as you can see, this creates its own layer. This is called an adjustment layer, and this will allow us to adjust our levels in that section. And while that's all really well and good, it is going to affect the layer below. You can also double click and re-bring it back up again, and you can adjust it there. Now it does have an option here. If you do have multiple objects, and you'll see this later on in the tutorial as well, if you have multiple objects, you can have an adjustment layer affect only the layer below or all layers below by clicking this little button here. And the great thing about it is at any point you can go back and readjust that. So that is one technique. I'm actually going to delete that, and I'm going to show you another technique. So all of these have got their pros and cons. That one there in particular, its con is you're going to end up with another layer taking up real estate in your layers panel. The other technique is to convert this to a smart object. So right click, convert to smart object, give it a few seconds, and there it is there. And I can then go to image, adjust, levels, and do my levels adjustment here. I'm just going to push this around a little bit and move it into place and hit OK. And the advantage of that is you can see now we've got the smart filter here, we've got levels. We can access that once again by clicking on the levels icon here and re-editing it, and we can also hide that with this little drop down here. So now that's a smart object, whatever filters or adjustments we add to that, it's going to be embedded in there. There is a downside to this. We aren't going to be able to erase this. So E for erase, we can't paint on this, and we cannot basically take big chunks out of it or even use a healing brush on it. So that can be a bit of a downside. So at some point, if you do need to use a tool like that, you might need to say goodbye to it or rasterize it, or it's going to get a little bit tricky. So those are the options. I'm actually going to just sort of stick with a raster layer, and I'm just going to trust my gut instinct. If you're unsure of your gut instinct, do just duplicate that layer so you've got a backup, and then you can just go image, adjust. So these are the three steps. I usually recommend image, adjust levels, and have a push around of that until you get something that's going to work for you and looking good, but not, you don't want the light to bleed out and destroy the details, but I just want to get a little bit of lightness on this, and we could always knock it back later, but if you push it too hard, you're going to destroy the image. So I think that's pretty good there, and I'm going to hit OK. So that's permanent now. I can only step back in history to do that, but I've got the backup here if I need to. So there it is there. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at potentially cropping this image down. So to crop the image down, if I press C for crop, it's over here in our toolbar, and there is our crop tool. There's also a perspective crop tool, slice, and all the rest of it. But we're just going to use the crop tool in this case. And what this allows me to do is I can grab these edges and I can crop down my image. I can sort of start going, what parts of the image don't I need? And I can start cutting that out. Now there are a couple of options as well. We'll step back out of there. For this, you can also set up a width and height resolution, and you can also do aspect ratios, and you can actually create your own ratios as well. You can manually type them in here. Now there are some preset ones, 16 by 9s in there, that's quite a popular one, and wherever you move that, that is going to keep that 16 by 9 ratio. So that's going to give you a good idea of, if you're using 16 by 9 ratio for film, there it is. Don't forget, in a crop situation, you can also rotate your image as well, as required, and there's also a straighten option, which is pretty handy as well. But for this case, I'm probably not going to need that. I can just rotate and use eye level for that. So I'm not going to do that. You've got a couple options I just want to mention here. Delete cropped pixels. So this is actually a really good one to try and have a think about. If you have delete cropped pixels on, it means that whatever is outside of that area that you're going to crop will be deleted. And this includes all the other layers if you've got multiple layers. So if you've got half a car sticking here and the rest of the car is outside of that cropped area, if that is ticked on, that car will be cut in half. But on the positive side of that, if you've got a whole lot of assets outside of your frame and you're not going to use them, your image is going to get really big. So already we can see down the bottom left here, this is already pretty chunky at the moment. So I'm going to leave that on for now, and I'm really not, I'm not too fussed because I'm actually going to stretch out my canvas, but I'm going to leave that as cropped in that situation. While I'm here, I'm actually just going to delete this. I want to keep my files down to a minimum. Next thing we want to actually start having a think about is how big we want our canvas. So I'm going to use the crop tool again. So when we're designing this, we want to have a think about how big our canvas is, big as far as if we're going to add camera moves or if this is going to be only a small portion of our matte painting. And I'm kind of jumping the gun here because I haven't talked about the concepting for this, but while I'm talking about the crop tool, let's have a look at it. So the crop tool isn't just for shrinking down your image. I'm going to switch out of the ratio here and just go to the top ratio. Let's get rid of these numbers, and this way I can not be confined by 16 by 9. And what I can do is now is if I want to have, say, a crane shot where I start up in the sky and move down, I can stretch out my canvas, apply that, and now my canvas is quite large. So I can build up a sky plane here and then move my camera down when I have my final shot. So if you do need to do something like that, remember, once we've finished our matte, then we can take it into another document and we can move our matte painting around and only show the areas that we want. So if it's if we're doing a tracking shot, for example, you could also stretch out your canvas, and this starting point is going to be there. We'll have a quick word of warning with that. Once you start stretching your canvas out, please do check your image size, and if your computer starts slowing down, this is a really good option for you to do. Go image size, and this will give you an image size. It'll have it in different formats here, so width and height. I recommend, if you're in film and television, do check out pixels. You should have a pretty good idea of how many pixels your resolution is depending on which film format you are using. So 72 pixels per inch is what we're using for film, and you can see here this is already getting up pretty damn high. It's we're looking at 10 times the size of a standard HD film. If you're going 4K, keep that in mind. I do recommend going bigger than the aspect ratio and format that you're going to intend to use, but not that big that it's going to slow everything down to the nth degree, because some of these processes can be power hungry. So let's cancel out of that. I'm going to undo that. I'm just going to keep it simple for the moment. I can do that crop at any point, so I'm just going to leave that as is. So a few things I do want to check out before we go to the next step is how aligned my photo mashup is. So I'm actually going to use these rulers on the side. Now if you don't see these rulers on the side, you can bring them up by going to View, Rulers, or as you can see there's a shortcut, Command R or Control R on a PC, and that will toggle them on or off. And all we do is we grab our Move tool, and then we can click and drag these across. And I'm just going to use these just to check the alignment of this. You know, some buildings are crooked anyway. If you've got 3-point perspective where your buildings are really tall and you're looking up at them, then this isn't going to help you much. But I just want to have a look. This is pretty much eye level sort of stuff, and that looks pretty good. Reason why I'm mentioning that, if you are doing an alignment of multiple images, sometimes you will get like a fisheye effect or a distortion that's not going to work. You want to clear these out, you can go to View and Clear Guides. While I'm here, I will mention that if you have Snap turned on, this can be very frustrating for doing what we're going to be doing in most cases, because it's going to try and move your objects around where you don't want them. So I do recommend turning off Snap. And while we're here, let's clear those guides. View, Clear Guides. So I'm actually not going to use those at the moment. If you do need to distort your image, you can. You can go to Control T, or you can go Edit, Transform, Free Transform. That will get you right there. Then right click, and you can do things like Distort, where you can grab the corners of these and you can start distorting your image, or right click and Warp, where you can start warping out your image if you need to. So this might help you if you do have a weird warp that's popped up, or if you've got a fisheye sort of situation. They have changed this in the last year, so it's kind of a little bit, it used to be a grid mechanism, but you can turn that back on as well. So if you do need to do some fixing up, do that before you start bringing in other assets. So you want to make sure your start plate is looking really, really good. The next thing I'm going to do is talk about adding a perspective grid to this. So I'm going to do that in the next installment.